Come on in, folks. Come on in. Let's enjoy the show that we deserve. The show that we deserve. The show that makes everything worth it. The show that gets everything sorted information-wise for us. My God. My God. One 170th. Yes. 171st episode. Correct. There it goes. Here it is. It is done. It is done. We're ready. We are ready. Today is Sunday, so not much is gonna happen, I guess. Not a lot of people are gonna join in. Nobody wants to wake up on Sunday, you know. All your lazy guys, they don't wake up on Sundays, but we don't take a break, right? We don't take a break. Let me check myself on LinkedIn. Correct. I'm very good on LinkedIn. Let me check myself on YouTube. That is good as well. So I will begin. The show that we deserve. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! But before we go, we got to follow a tradition. You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail, every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a copper mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like hot water with black pepper in it. And here we go. Nice. Let's do it again. Beautiful. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together, which is such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. Good morning, says Mr. Peeyush Sethi. Good morning, Mr. Sethi. So we've got to talk about the longevity, the immortality experiment or ambition painted by Mr. Deepinder Goyal from Eternal Zomato. So yesterday he came out with a report publishing something about continue his research project which aims at immortality, essentially longevity, and he found out that gravity could be the missing link between the current mortality piece. So essentially he says that inversions, active inversions, passive inversions, they help blood flow to the brain, and blood flow to the brain delays aging of the brain. Aging of the brain delays aging of the body. So he believes. So this is yet again another move in the experiment of, let's say, immortality, or the project or ambition of immortality. Now immortality as a project, as an ambition, as an experiment might seem to be very radical. It might seem like a radical idea, but it is not a radical idea. It's actually an idea as old as mankind. I mean, I'll write about it. I'll write an article on it. It's something interesting. I should write it about, write something about it. So people have been wondering about immortality since the beginning of the world, right? In fact, so if you trace the beginning, why do people create kingdoms? Why do people create art? Why do people create religions? Why do people create companies, institutions? Why do people build cities? Why do people build anything? Why do people build a home? Why do people make children? Right? So there's a very good philosophy book called Denial of Death. It's by Ernest Becker. Denial of Death. What it says is that everybody knows that they're gonna die. Okay? Everybody knows that they're gonna die, and they want to escape that. So everybody is aware of their finiteness and they want to escape that finiteness, right? They want to deny death. And people in the quest of trying to deny death, they do different things. Somebody builds an empire, somebody builds an institution, somebody builds a city, somebody builds uh, you know a company, somebody creates art, somebody creates music, somebody, you know most people, even the people who are not actively engaged in a pursuit like that, like a grand ambition, even those people, they build a home, they get attached to a religion, they make kids, right? Why do people reproduce? I mean, why do you think people essentially make children, right? Why do you think people build a home and get attached to things bigger than themselves? According to Denial of Death, the philosophy book which I just quoted, it is about escaping mortality, right? So while what Mr. Dipender Goyal is saying sounds like a radical, flashy idea, it's just very, very old. Now, denial of death has gotten a new meaning with the new rich armed with science, right? Armed with the new science. People have a new, uh, let's say, armory as when it comes to approaching immortality. So if you look at Mr. Larry Ellison, he's an 80-year-old guy who looks like 40, right? If you talk about Peter Thiel, sir, he is basically uh, he talks about preserving his consciousness, preserving his body for a time when consciousness essentially comes back, or when they figure out how to bring back the dead, they feed consciousness in a body. So that's what he's looking at. He's People have accused him of using blood boys, right? Blood transfusion from the young to stay young, and so on and so forth. Now, all sorts of longevity experiments have been going on. This new person called, I guess it's his name is Brian Johnson. So he talked a lot about longevity, and he is basically hyper interventionist, regimes to uh, extend life, so to speak. Now, the problem with immortality as an experiment, as an ambition, is that it invariably goes towards interventionism, right? So, philosophically, interventionism is when you try to live in a controlled environment, right? You basically try to intervene. You figure out one particular thing that this is going to help, and you start doing that. Now, that leads to second order effects, right? That leads to problems which are unintended and surprisingly serious in their own right. So interventionism becomes the way to live. Now, when you intervene, right, when you're living in a hyper protected kind of an environment where that Brian Johnson guy essentially lives in a plastic bubble or something, he came to Delhi, he got rashes, he rushed off. So when you live in that kind of an interventionist environment, you make your body essentially very fragile. You limit its exposure to shocks. But body, to an extent is anti-fragile. I mean, some level of shocks it experiences, those are good. That's why people work out. They do weight training. When they do weight training, the muscle tears up and it gets, it forms again. So essentially, that's how people build bodies, right? It's bodies anti-fragility going again. So interventionism as a philosophical approach sort of ruins everything for bodies, right? They screw everything up. When you start looking at uh, hyper moderated, hyper monitored environments, like you're measuring blood flow and everything, and you're just keeping it doesn't help, right? It doesn't help. It only hurts, and it hurts in ways that you don't see. Secondly, when you zoom out, right? When you zoom out, even at a much larger level, you find out that immortality is not good. Is not a good philosophy. It's not good for mankind, right? It's not a nice ambition, because while humans are finite, while humans are fragile, right? We are fragile. We die. Our death essentially leads to better outcomes for the DNA. The DNA becomes anti-fragile. So whatever shocks we experience over millions of years, right, as organisms, those shocks essentially lead to better outcomes for the DNA. And our staying in the DNA, our staying in the gene pool for an extended period of time doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody. It's like a very selfish, a very inward, self centered view of looking at humanity, that I want to live forever. So when you look at folklores, right, when you look at, uh, I mean, if you look at Western philosophy or Western mythology, there's a principle of Xanadu, right? Xanadu, is it Western or is it Eastern? Just one second. Yeah, Kubla Khan. So it's not really Western, but Western for us. So Kubla Khan, Xanadu philosophy talks about an immortal man. And because he's immortal, he's forced to deal with the perils of the world, because he's basically living forever, right? And nobody around him uh, can do that. So a lot of detachment and a lot of attachment. So that's Eastern philosophy. Sorry, Middle Eastern, you can say. If you look at East, if you look at Indian philosophy, Ashwatthama was cursed with immortality, and it's a pretty solid situation. Then if you look, what are other examples of immortality in you know Hinduism has immortality a lot. A lot of examples like Hanuman, Bhagwan Hanuman is immortal. I guess Mr. I guess Ved Vyas ji was also immortal. Seven human figures that are immortal, including Ashwatthama. So a lot of, if you look at philosophical or religious interpretation of immortality, it is also not uh, you know a very encourage, and it's all logical. So if you look at it, uh, that's what there is a comment. Mr. Manjunath Madhabal says Frankenstein 2025 movie by GDT deals with the immortality concept, and it is an awesome movie, like always, from GDT. So I haven't watched Frankenstein 2025, but yeah, so a lot of movies. Yes, I was actually talking about Superman. So even in Superman, there was the cartoons that I used to watch as a kid. There was this episode where an enemy of Superman essentially becomes immortal, right? And when he becomes immortal, it's a beautiful cartoon. So even if I watched it as a kid, but I was just watching it, and it was so amazing. It was just extraordinary. So this is the guy who essentially kills Superman or something of that sort. Superman comes back, and he's the only man left on the planet when humanity has become extinct, right? And he's figured out a way to survive with cockroaches and all, because the myth is that cockroaches will survive the nuclear holocaust. So he's the only man. I'm forgetting the name of that person. Somebody, if somebody is a Superman fan, they can talk about it. And he just stays alone, with nobody essentially living with him. So that's also a very interesting portrayal. But again, the flip side is that as a science experiment, right? If you don't get immortality, and you probably won't, at least you'll get some longevity, and that is a nice thing to have, right? So at least, and the second order effect of a scientific expedition is that even if you don't get what you want, you might get something that you didn't expect, and turned out to be nice, right? It could be good, it could be bad, but if you're pursuing science, you might be pleasantly surprised with the outcome. So that is something that's going on, something that needed to be addressed. It was something very interesting, I thought, and I'll write a very, very long and deep article about it. Uh, I got a comment on LinkedIn, says Mr. Siddharth Mohanty says hi. Hi, good morning. Anyway, so let's move on to the next story. Beginning of the demand revival. So we've talked a lot about FMCG demand revival. We don't need to talk about that. Uh, uh, let's before GST 2.0 unboxed a surprising Q2 before GST. Volumes grows 4.7 from last year. Urban Pips rural sales data. So Kantar Research has published that even before GST, there was a demand revival. So are you surprised, viewers of Thinkers Frequency? Is it surprising you that even before GST, there was some demand revival? Like if you've been watching Thinkers Frequency, you wouldn't be surprised at all, right? Why? Because before GST, there was another move that happened in that fray, right? And that move also tried to address the personal consumption, domestic consumption play. What was that? It was the personal tax rationalization, right? No personal tax below 12 lakh. Why was that done? That was done to essentially help the domestic consumption play, right? So that worked to an extent, So that's exactly what everybody must have been expecting, at least the viewers of Thinkers Frequency, and they are pointing it out as a great insight. Not really an insight. Not really an insight. Moving on, folks. Nations warming up to India, warming up to India turned travel hotspots. Russia, Vietnam, South Korea, Thailand, see uptick. Azerbaijan, Turkey fall out of flavor. So a lot of Indians are essentially traveling because of visa relaxation overseas, right? And this has a lot to do with geopolitical linkages that we've been having, like India enjoying some support from Russia, right? And so on and so forth. South Korea, Thailand, Japan. Nothing new. We've discussed this. Today is a very slow day for news. Not really happening in the world of news. But there is a happening when it comes to Indian automotive sector. Dragon in driver's seat revs up EV market evolution. Electric trailblazers. So Chinese automotive companies have begun taking over the Indian market, which is a huge, huge happening, right? We've been talking about how China could be a very, very bad news for Indian automakers. Right now, Indian automakers are pretty happy, Tata, Mahindra, and so on and so forth. But they've not yet competed in full spirit with the Chinese trouble, right? BYD has sort of come, Volvo, Swedish origin, but Chinese in a way. I didn't know, by the way, that Volvo essentially was Chinese. But yeah, they say that so there are a few companies. BYD in 2 years, less than 2 years, BYD, British origin but China owned, MG and Volvo of Swedish heritage and China ownership have taken over South Korean and German rivals to claim nearly a third of Indian electric vehicle market. So they already have like 30%. 30%, that's just the beginning. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency will remember how we talked about how Ford, the chief of Ford, talked about the absolute risk of going out of business if the Chinese threat wasn't dealt with, right? Do you remember that? We talked about it a few days ago, I guess. That was Ford. He said Chinese cars are essentially really killing it. They're no longer playing on cost. It's no longer a cost arbitrage as it always was with Chinese products. It is now a technology arbitrage. It's now an experience arbitrage. These people are essentially way, way ahead. Not just from Indian, standards. They are ahead of the West as well. We recently talked about how China, the fastest car now, the Chinese car essentially made that record, right? 400 some kilometers per hour. We talked about that when it happened, and that is exactly what's going to happen in India as well. And since India and Chinese relationship is warming, right? India-China relationship is warming up. Uh, these people might just be looking at a fresh market to kill. Do you think Indian companies would survive the Chinese onslaught? Very, very unlikely. Very unlikely. But let's see what happens. Let us see what happens. There is a report about Hollywood failing the big screen test 25 films, many stars, zero hits. So 25 films, many stars, zero hits. That's the score. Well, I've always talked about how, 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I predicted that cinemas are gonna literally die because they've signed the deal with the devil. And when I said the deal with the devil, I meant OTTs, of course. Usually, before OTTs, cinemas used to have a very long theatrical window, right? So when you if you watch an interview, this is a pretty good interview that you could look at. It's an interview with Matt Damon, the famous actor. So Matt Damon had an interview where he said, where the question was, "Now, why don't we make good movies like before, like the little movies? Now every movie is sort of an event. Why don't we make the movies that we grew up?" And he's like, I love that. I used to grow up watching movies with just one guy, one girl, and it's their story and so on and so forth. That had a lot of intellectual exploration of the human spirit and drama, and it was romance and comedy and so on. It's just like understated movies, and I used to love those movies, right? But the thing is, our business was changed with the advent of internet because DVDs went out of business, right? So he said, before DVDs, when this movie used to come out, right? Let's say this movie took $50 million to make, right? You spend 50 million more in P&A, print and advertising, marketing. So you make $100 million movie, right? Now it has to make $200 million in the box office, but that doesn't matter, just to break even, right? Because half of the money goes to the theaters. So he says that it doesn't matter because 6 months later we had a DVD run, and DVD run was like a new opening for the movie. So whatever word of mouth that movie collected, right? If it was a good movie, the DVD essentially was a second opening. When DVDs went out, all the pressure of the money uh, went towards, you know, just the box office opening and making a little movie, right? And expecting it to make $200 million in box office at that time became a bit of a trouble. That's why you had franchises about franchises, right? Big movies, event movies, taking all the space. So if you talked about we talked about Judd Apatow, sir, right? The great comedian, comedy movie director, Knocked Up, 40-Year-Old Virgin, This Is 40, King of Staten Island, Anchorman, so on. It's like great movies, right? So those movies just faded, absolutely faded. There was an era from 1990, mid 1990s to 2005, and then after 2005 all of those comedy movies just went out of business. Why? Because DVDs went away, right? The internet came along. Now with OTTs, forget about the 6 month window. What happened was these studios started signing up an OTT deal within 18-20 days of movie release, like 17 days. That sort of killed the incentive of people to go to cinemas at all, right? And you essentially screwed that whole paradigm by reducing the window. So earlier it was 180 days, then it became 100 days, 120 days, 100 days, 90 days, and then you started seeing movies coming to theaters just for show, and then coming on OTT just 30 days later, right? Even 20 days later. That sort of killed the business, perhaps irreparably, because that you never had to do that. Now, and the beauty is that you can't make money on OTT like you can make money on uh, you know box office. You can never make that money on OTT because number one, OTTs will have the whole sanctioning power, and OTTs are an aggregate business, so they don't pay as much as cinema can pay, because cinema is ticket sales, right? You sell a ticket, you make money, and OTTs can never be unless it is pay-per-view, right? And pay-per-view didn't happen because OTTs played the game in a way where it essentially boosted their subscription numbers and pay-per-view doesn't boost the subscription number. So they essentially killed an entire industry, and it's not just an Indian uh, happening. It's talking about Hollywood as well. So if you look at the numbers, these people are saying. Uh, 25 dramas and comedies that movie company released in North America. Uh, Certainly not in the way that Hollywood has historically kept score. After the Hunt, starring Julia Roberts, Christie with Sydney Sweeney, Die My Love, Jennifer Lawrence, Robert Pattinson, you know, they all went down. So some numbers were very, very sad to watch. Hollywood has historically used 50 million in ticket sales by that measure after The Hunt, where Julia Roberts playing a college professor combating cancel culture. It cost $70 million to make and collected 3.3 million in box office. $70 million in budget and 3.3 million in box office. So that just lost all the money, right? All the money essentially. When it made $3 million in box office, that means producers got 1.5 million. So if they got 1.5 million, you can imagine what happened to them, right? They just got ruined on that movie, sadly. So that is what happened with Hollywood, and Bollywood is no different. So a lot of people, when they said Bollywood or Indian film industry could essentially revive itself by opening more theaters, and the thing they said was that India's theater density is less as compared to Hollywood, as compared to US and China. So US has 10 times more theaters. China has X number of more theaters. And I was like, more theaters isn't the answer, right? And then Mr. Bijli came along and he said, you need to have a more distributed way of launching movies. So you launch the movie in theaters, you let it run, right? 6 months later, you come out with pay-per-view, right? And then 6 months later, you come out with the streaming play, if at all. So you have to have that pay-per-view following the theatrical release, so that people have the incentive of actually going to the theater. Because if theaters die, the whole mall market dies, right? Because we discussed, the insight is that malls essentially use theaters, cinemas, to bring people in, to lure people in. You need to have an event to essentially bring people in, and movies used to be that event, not anymore. Happy Sunday, Nishant. Any movie recommendation, says Mr. Sumanth Kumar. Mr. Manjunath Madhubal says, the reason why all these movies are not performing is because they forgot about good script and just trying to impress Gen Z, LGBTQ, female protagonists, etc. There are no good characters nowadays. Mr. William Davis says, which resources do you follow to stay up to date for research? Reddit, any subreddit, Substack, any new publications, YouTube channels? Asks Mr. William Davis. So answering questions one by one. Mr. Sumanth Kumar, great movies. You can watch. Did you watch Judd Apatow's comedies? That is something that you could watch. There is a lot of good stuff happening. You could definitely watch Hawk at theaters. It's a good movie, great movie, and it's in theaters, so you should support theaters. I mean, I like doing that, so you could do that too. And if you're looking forward to a specific genre, you could tell me, and I'd love to lead you to a very, very good movie recommendation. According, as per Mr. Nath Madhubal, well, that is true. Hollywood essentially killed itself with the whole wokeism play, right? People didn't want that. I didn't want that. I watched one battle after another, right? I went to watch it in the theaters, and it was torture for me. It was such a pathetic piece of shit that I regretted it every moment of it. I regretted every penny I spent, every second I went there. So it was pathetic, and Hollywood has done it to itself, But the sad part is that there are some good movies, which sometimes happen, right? Unfortunately, they also fall apart because the business model itself uh, is sad right now. So humor, you should definitely check out Judd Apatow. Judd Apatow. So if you could look at Knocked Up, right? Knocked Up is a great movie. This is 40 is a great movie. 40-year-old version. It's good, funny stuff, right? So This is 40, I consider it a classic. So let me know how you feel. Moving on, folks. And it's a good laugh, smart movie, very nice stuff, right? Otherwise, we have tons of movies to watch. So that was about Hollywood, folks. Moving on. Shrimp exports to EU, Russia, and Australia. Oh, and I forgot to address the last question. Of course, So I follow, there is a varied source of information actually. Of course, there are a few publications which are solid, like ET, Economic Times is a staple. Mint is a staple. Then there's, when it comes to startup news, I follow N Tracker, and then there's for there are a lot of important people on Twitter. I follow Scott Adams sir very very religiously. I There are some finance people on Twitter like Zero Hedge, Unusual Whales, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of work. It's a very very diverse set of information. But yeah, ET sort of becomes the bedrock when it comes to. I am new to Hollywood. Everything you're talking about feels Latin and Greek to me. So then definitely you should get introduced to Judd Apatow, Mr. Sumanth Kumar, because it'll make you laugh, it'll make you think, and good humor never hurt anybody, right? So that'll be a very comfortable beginning for you. Watch 40-Year-Old Virgin, watch Knocked Up, either of the two movies, you'd love them, or watch This Is 40. So these three movies, whatever you like more, the trailer, go hit it. It's gonna be nice. Mr. Nitin, hello Nishant, good to be back. What do you think of open air theater business? Is it a profitable model? Open air theater. Are you talking about community viewing when it comes to the restaurants and premieres and so on and so forth? That kind of play? Well, I like that a lot. I like the community. So I go to support movies, right? I participate in fundraising campaigns and like crowdfunding of movies and stuff like that. So I participate in a lot of that. And sometimes they have these community viewings at open air restaurants and so on and so forth. So Rajat Kapoor sir was making a movie called RK. It was a brilliant movie, extremely good movie. And he was doing crowdfunding and I participated in it. And he had essentially an open premiere of Aankho Dekhi for people who supported RK, the crowdfunding campaign, and I was there and I got to meet him. So it is a very nice and niche business, right? Community kind of a business, but it's difficult to do at scale, of course, right? Because not everybody, it's hard to form a community. It has some customer acquisition costs which are not easy. Unfortunately, it's also a hyper local play, right? So the density of people who can participate in such events is also not easy, right? So you can't set up an open air play like a restaurant viewing experience or something anywhere, right? Because there are only a few pockets of people who are like Shauqeen like that, right? They want to have old movies and of course you can't play new movies because you won't get the license. So you can do old movies which have sort of gone out of print or something of that sort. And when you're doing that, you really need to have a very active community. So it's a very very difficult business, but it's a fun experiment, right? So if it's not a business, it's a good hobby, that's for sure. But business as a business, it's difficult, very difficult, very difficult. Moving on. A lot of political action, right, which we'll not discuss. Shrimp exports, by the way, have swollen. Thank you, Nishant, says Mr. You're welcome. Shrimp exports to EU, Russia, Australia to set to swell. Centre has ironed out legacy issues with markets and fixing trade hurdles, says Mr. Peeyush Goyal. We pressured EU to solve 9-year-old problem. Now 102 fisheries have gotten approval to export to EU. Of course, India exported $10 billion worth of marine stuff to US. All of that went to that became a big loss because what do you do? What do you do, right? So they found alternate markets and they fixed the situation almost. Almost. They're in the process of fixing the situation. Let's say, I'd like to address the hyper local in nature of that particular business is also the problem with the cloud kitchen business. Because let's say you start health kitchen, there are a lot of people who want to eat healthy, so you think, but there are not enough people who want to eat healthy in your area, and the cloud kitchen is limited by area. You cannot serve beyond 3 kilometers or 5 kilometers, right? So that kind of play also hurts a community offline experience like an open air theater, which is a very very big problem, very big problem. Moving on, folks. Defense PSU Goa Shipyard to invest 1,500 crore in Andhra Pradesh greenfield facility. Goa Shipyard is defense. It's a shipbuilding play, right? Defense PSU. 1,500 it's investing in Andhra Pradesh. Why? Because Goa, it's an interesting reason. Goa, essentially, when it gets monsoon, the work has to stop, right? So it needs a place to end the seasonality problem of the industry. That is why Goa Shipyard has chosen Andhra Pradesh, because unlike Goa, it offers some hedge to the seasonality aspect of it, right? So shipbuilding is an open air activity and monsoons affect us directly. When monsoons hit Goa, the activity completely stop. But a facility on the east coast would mean that the monsoon hit shipbuilding activity at a different time. So when this is gonna shut down, this is gonna get up, and Andhra Pradesh will essentially benefit. Again, this is a string of stories. It's a developing story. Andhra Pradesh to get 20 lakh crores to create 20 million jobs, so to speak. Sorry, 2 million jobs. So let's see what happens. Andhra Pradesh is also getting 4,500 crores from Anand Raj for a data center, an IT park, right? So a lot of activity happening there. Moving on, folks. Canada visa security hits Indian students. Canada colleges, some visa problems. Indians facing trouble. Nearly half of applicants of this year's autumn intake face visa rejections due to clampdown on study permits. So Canada is surprisingly having that kind of development. I thought Canada is very willing to take whoever US rejects, right? But that definitely doesn't seem to be the case for now. Moving on, folks. Amber has bought majority stake in Shoguni Tech. Amber is one of the players who's gotten electronics, ECMS, the Electronics Component Manufacturing Scheme beneficiary. It's one of those beneficiaries. So it has acquired PCB makers, going to make new PCBs. Not a big deal, but an ongoing story in the whole electronics manufacturing play. Moving on, folks. This really made me laugh. So there's something called wealth whisperers, right? Wealth psychology. These are psychologists essentially with some background in finance, and their job is to help the ultra rich. They deal with money related stress. What do you think about that? So your job as a wealth psychologist is to help the ultra rich deal with money related stress. So, from inheritance battles to guilt of privilege to somebody becoming suddenly very, very rich. So what these psychologists do is that they sit with those people, they listen to them, they tell them ways to cope with their extraordinary amount of money and the stress that it has brought, and then they take some money at the end of the session. Oh my god. It is a real job, folks. It is a real job, so I'll tell you. Wealth psychology studies relationship between money and mind, including mindsets that lead to financial success and challenges associated with wealth. Right? What do wealth psychologists do? They work with HNIs to manage issues like money anxiety, inheritance conflicts, guilt about wealth, and stress of sudden fortune. They help people understand the emotional side of money and how wealth shapes identity, relationships, and decision making. So apparently, people, and this particular industry is growing because India's millionaires are rising and so on and so forth. So startup guys who suddenly sell their company for thousands of crores, they develop panic attacks, and so on because they don't know what to do with the money. Also, they've been attached with the identity of building the company. Suddenly, that company goes out of their hands, and they're very, very clueless about the whole situation. So come these wealth psychologists. They go to these ultra rich people, they listen to them for a couple of hours, give them some advice, right, and take money. That is a very good business model. How do I sign up? How do we sign up, folks? I mean, do I have to do a psychology course for this? But anyway, this is funny. This is definitely funny. I think a lot of it stems because of lack of real, what is it? What can you call it? I'm trying to search the right word for it, but I'm sure you will do a wonderful job, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. I mean, I really want this job. So I'll go to a billionaire, right? And I'll listen to him about how he's stressed about the money, right? And then I'll take money from him, right? How cool is that? Does it get any better? Is my question. I mean, can it get any better? So after the session, let's say if I charge my fee is a bomb, right? I charge like whatever I can charge, like some obscene amount of money, right? And then the guy is so awkward because he was like, what do I mean, I just told you about the stress related to money, and now that you've asked me for money, I can't say no, right? So it's a very awkward situation, and just laugh your way to the bank. But seriously, I think it has a lot to do with lack of sense of purpose and mission in life, right? Money obviously is not a purpose. Money is not a mission. Money is a tool. Money is a resource, right? A resource to be allocated, resource to be enjoyed, but it is not a purpose, and it's never a replacement of a purpose. And people who never had any purpose, never had any taste for life, right? They just find themselves out in the water because they don't know what to do with. Like if you are a well-off person, right, there are so many things to do. You can support art, you can support artists, you can support sports people. They live in dire straits. They are like they live in abject poverty while chasing a dream, right? Both artists and sports people. You can support those guys. You can support businessmen, startup entrepreneurs, young people who are trying to do something interesting. You can obviously engage in philanthropy. You don't do that. You have none of that. You don't have any sense of mission. Don't have any sense of purpose. You don't have any sense of gratitude, of paying it forward, right? Of giving back. All you do when it comes to giving back is join Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation so that you can network with more rich people, right? So that's the mindset of some very pathetic individuals at the top, unfortunately. Thankfully, India is very lucky to have people like, let's say, Sanjeev Bikhchandani sir, right? And even the new startup entrepreneurial successes like Binny Bansal sir or Sachin Bansal sir, like Binny Bansal sir especially. So as soon as they got out of their own entrepreneurial journey, they started supporting young businesses, which is so nice, right? Or let's say Dipender Goyal sir, he's also experimenting with science, supporting startups, and so on and so forth. So a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, a sense of helping others, that sort of would would help you avoid a wealth psychologist who essentially listens to you, to your trauma stories, and then takes money from you, right? But till then, till the time that realization actually hits these people, I'm signing up for a psychology course. Moving on. Taking off on a superjet, India has partnered with Russia, of course, we talked about this, for an SJ-100. This was essentially a counter to American Boeing troubles, right? When America was laying all the tariff issue, HAL essentially signed a contract or an understanding for SJ-100, Sukhoi, the superjet, for consumer commercial jet, right? But it is obviously very hard because that particular jet has some sort of service issues, maintenance issues, and it's an expensive after sales service play, which is bad news for people who are, for Indian Airlines. So a lot of Indian airlines are making losses. It's a very fragile play, as we've talked about. You start with as a billionaire, then become a millionaire. SpiceJet made losses. It's almost out, right? Go Air is done. Jet is done, right? That's very Indigo also made losses this particular quarter, I believe. Air India, of course, is in extraordinary stress in all ways possible. So Indian airlines don't have the money, right, to spend, and an adventure like this and an exercise like this might make them. So there is a lack of demand, even though there shouldn't be a lack of demand because these people are essentially expanding. Airline as an industry is expanding because of Udan Yojana, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. However, it's still, some teething issues. I'm sure they could figure it out. And when they do, they'll be having an alternative to Boeing, the American scam of an organization, and also Airbus, which is doing well. But, it'll always help to have something else in the market, right? Moving on, folks. Wake up and smell the copy. There is a deep dive on the ad agency business dying out. Ad agency business is, of course, dying out. Everybody knows that, right? WPP, the legendary company, right? The ad agency, the British ad agency, its stock price is lower than what it was in 1998, right? Uh, there is a lot of consolidation. Even the Dentsu Group, the Japanese ad agency, it is selling its international business, right? There is a lot of consolidation happening in the ad market business, ad agency market business. Now they've done a deep dive and they found out that the whole market has fundamentally changed, right? Now everything is performance marketing. Now, what that means is that ad agencies, the creatives, the intelligence, right? All that is needed to build a brand, right? But in the era of social media advertising, in the era of digital advertising, that is not the concern, because in digital advertising, what you're doing is you're shooting impressions and you're shooting again and again and again till the time those impressions lead to conversions, which is called performance marketing. Performance marketing is basically bombardment of a lot of creatives with little creative value and more of an iterative data backed approach, right? So that essentially kills the 30-second ad business, the 30-second TV ad business, which was essentially very, very important, right? Also, the structure of these ad companies, the ad agencies, was split into creatives and ad buying. And as that happened, right, the industry itself sort of started struggling. Also, the creatives, it was a very, very good business in the 50s and 60s, the Mad Men era. We've talked about Mad Men, the major series, the very, very popular, legendary TV series called Mad Men, right? Tracing the origin and development of the ad agency business, right? Ad Men, they changed it to Mad Men. So that was a very good time to join ad agencies because there was a lot of money and so on and so forth. But when everything changed, when it became a media buying operation and the whole thing, right, the ability for ad companies to pay that much essentially got ruined. When that got ruined, when talent goes out, you see, and this is the case with every falling industry. When an industry starts falling, you see talent going out. When talent goes out, everything starts going down. So that happened, and then of course social media led to whole creators, right? People who could be advertisers essentially became influencers for themselves. They became content creators, they became comedians or whatever, right? So ad agency as a business became uncool. In 90s in India, ad agencies were the thing, right? 80s, 90s. Most of the brands have in-house ad departments, plus AI is also impacting directly. So AI again is a death knell when it comes to ad agency business, and so on. The whole play essentially has shrunk to an unbelievable degree. So if you want to know the numbers, folks, uh, traditional network agencies like Ogilvy, McCain, Publicis, Dentsu, and there's one that sums up all, Tumultus, right? WPP, I already told you about. Its valuation has declined to $3 billion from a peak of $25 billion, right? Revenue sliding 5% this year. Uh, they've joined Gray with Ogilvy, right? I told you about McCain. I told you about the Dentsu group, right? So a lot of actions. Now, let's say when I told you about ad agency, the whole performance marketing angle, let me tell you about something that I'm probably missing. Yeah. Uh, According to him, two big downgrades happened in the industry. There was first the split between creative and media strategies and the consequent end of commission model. For decades, at the height of Mad Men era, advertising agencies were simply paid 15% of the overall marketing budget. However, the unbundling of creating and media buying spelt an end to the high end salaries, and that sort of killed the industry. So that's what happened, and now nobody wants to join an ad company, right? It's fallen out of flavor, even though advertising essentially is a very good link between art and commerce, right? But all that has gone away with the impression based performance marketing play. Now it's less art and it's more data analytics, right? So that's what it is. Moving on, folks. US is dealing with some inflation, right? While placing tariffs, the beauty is that they place tariffs on stuff like coffee and a lot of commodities. Now that led to food inflation because price elasticity cannot happen to food commodities and essential. So if you place a tariff there, right? If let's say you place a tariff on bananas, there is no replacement of bananas, right? If you can make it, great. If you can grow it, great. If you can't, you'll have to have, because it's not like people will stop eating bananas. They can't. I mean, they'll try, but they can't. So US is facing some inflation, and as a response to that inflationary trouble, they've cut duty on food staples, which is very obvious, right? Tariff happy Trump struggling with high consumer prices. Well, nobody should be surprised. Moving on, folks. Madam Margaret Atwood. She's come out with a memoir, right? It's basically called memoir, book of lives, memoir of sorts. So people who don't know, she's culturally very relevant. Madam Margaret Atwood, she wrote a book called Handmaid's Tale in 1985, right? And she's been like a feminist icon since then, right? So that book essentially is sort of a bedrock of modern feminism in a way, right? And she became a very very prominent figure in the modern feminist movement, so to speak. A lot of people called her a feminist. She's like, what? Why? Please don't call me a feminist, right? Because there are 85 kinds of them. And then people also found her writings and her opinions on things very very prophetic, right? So it's like she could look into the future, and she says that I'm not the one to look into the future, because if I could, I would have cornered the stock market a long time ago. She had a sense of humor, and she didn't write a memoir. So a lot of people wanted her to write a biography of sorts, autobiography, but she never did. But now she's come out with a memoir, right? A book of lives, a memoir of sorts, she says. It's gonna be a great book, I'm sure, 100%, right? And secondly, even though she is such a feminist icon, in 2019, she fell out of favor from the liberal class. So the liberals, the left, essentially went very anti Margaret Atwood. They started chastising her. Why? Because she deflected from the Me Too movement. So in 2019, it was all about Me Too, believe women, and so on and so forth. And she came with the conventional innocent until proven guilty. She said due process is being, basically fall on because of this whole mob ruining of people's reputations and lives, and she didn't favor it. And then the left sort of chastised her, despite her being such an icon of the left feminist movement for decades and decades altogether. But she's a badass. She didn't give a shit about it, and she's still a legend. And new book, right? New memoir. Memoirs are my favorite class of movies. I've always said autobiographies. There's nothing more interesting than a life well lived. Nothing more entertaining. Nothing more inspiring than a life well lived. And when a person is writing a book, right, about their life, they really pour their heart out because they want it to be interesting, and that sort of leads to a lot of good things. So most of my favorite books of the last 5 years have been autobiographies, right? Great books. A foolish question to ask Mr. William Davis, but let's go. How do you work on articulation and effective communication, especially English? Just think and speak in English? So are you finding my articulation okay? Because I struggle with it. So that's one of the things why I started, one of the reasons why I started Thinker's Frequency. Because I think in Hindi, I talk in Hindi. I am a totally desi person, very, very desi in all ways, okay? But uh, it was very important for me to speak in English because, even though nobody understands English in India, people pretend to like it. People really think of it as something, and it's still the case, by the way. People really talk in English, even in Indian corporate sector. So they are North Indians. It's not even like there is a communication gap. They don't understand Hindi. I instinctively jump in Hindi, right? But these people, if, it's a very awkward situation when I'm talking in Hindi and they're talking in English. It's not like I can't speak in English, right? So, but what I figured out was that because I don't speak English, at my house, or I just choose to speak Hindi all over, my speaking of English had become very pedestrian, very functional. There was no art value in the way I was speaking. And when I write, it's beautiful, right? My writings become very popular because I, pour it with a lot of uh, art in it. I mean, I pour a lot of art into it, but my spoken word wasn't as artful at all. And there was a lot of ums, there was a lot of ahs, there's a lot of, all of those pauses, right? Which I wanted to fix. So that's one of the reasons why I started Thinker's Frequency, because at least in this 1 hour, I'll be speaking in English uh, only by rule, right? Even though people said, man, if you make it happen in Hindi, the viewership will jump and so on and so forth. And I'm like, who gives a shit about viewership? So I'll have to, it's to improve my diction. And I'm so glad that you find it great. It's great, man. So thank you so much. It's an effort I'm making, right? You've got to do it, unfortunately. So now when I talk to people, they're like, after 170 days, it's become so nice, right? That when I talk to people now, they're almost scared of what I'm saying because it's quick-witted, it's funny, it's artful, right? So now when they start talking to me, they're like, whoa, whoa, slow down, man. Can you slow down a little? So on and so forth. So it's pretty interesting, right? With that, we shall come to the end of 171st episode of Thinkers Frequency, folks. Not a lot. It's a very slow day for news. But I hope you like the episode. I hope you like the insights uh, and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch it. I hope you like the daily mental workout. It's so nice to do it every day, not get lazy. Good routine, following it every day. It's awesome. I hope it was fun. I hope it added value to you. It definitely added a lot of value to me. So I should thank Mr. Peeyush Sethi, Mr. Manjunath Madhabal, Mr. Sumanth Kumar, Mr. William Davis, Mr. Nithin, sorry, M. Rithin, uh, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, and everybody else who joined. Not many people today, but that's okay. That's okay. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye. What do I say? Uh, Hopefully, it's a line which I speak, right? Uh, I'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time, hopefully. Something of that sort. I'm just forgetting my outro. But take care. Bye bye.